Practice Makes Perfect by Neon Zangetsu, Chapter 4, A Little Bit of Fear, Part 2. He packed his bags that night. In hindsight, it really wasn't that difficult to do, not when he had already made most of his preparations. First came rations and water for the trek to Vale, then what little funds he'd managed to squirrel away from his allowance. Next came his armor, carefully concealed in a case, one which was in turn sealed away in a scroll in a lone scroll on his personage for safekeeping. He cracked it open now in the darkness of his room just to make sure it was still there. His armor was sleeker than what it might have been, a light breastplate embroidered with red and gold, with bracers for his arms and shoulders, and two more for his knees. It was a light armor, forged of chakra folded metal steel, powerful to take a strike from an Ursa and still hold strong. It would do well enough in his pack if push came to shove. Best to hide it away for now. If he was caught wearing his armor in the middle of the night, well, he didn't want to be caught, period. Crocera Moors would do in a pinch. The case was closed and sealed back into the scroll. John looked left, John looked right, making certain no one was watching. John sniffled just once and scrubbed at his eyes. Then he opened his window and dove out. Alighted in a pointed crouch on the grass knolled outside, he took a moment to steady himself. He'd have expected a trap to go off. Dad was rather fond of those, or an alarm to sound. There would be an explosion of light or color, and he'd been caught, dragged back into the house and made to explain himself. He'd expected, well, something, anything. Nothing happened. Behind him, the Ark household remained still and quiet in the night, utterly unaware of his subterfuge, and hurt, knowing he would be leaving all this behind, leaving with their disapproval. But it was something he had to do. He'd spawned and hidden enough shadow clones about the Ark household to distract everyone for a while, to maintain the illusion that he was still here. It might even fool them for a few days, until they found the note. He knew Dad would sniff him out sooner or later, but that wasn't the point. They didn't know which academy he was aiming for, and in that he held the advantage. He just needed a head start. No point in putting it off any longer then. The time was now. John hefted his supplies, tensed his legs. Here goes. He ran. All the world turned to a blur before him as he shot forward, vaulting a fence, skirting the high wall of Ansel, then racing clear up. When he was certain there were no guards to be found, he hit the trees and kept running, refusing to look back. If he didn't know he would be undone, he just knew it. So he ran and ran. He did, ran and ran some more. Leaving, are you? Until a shadow fell over him. He had half an instinct, a warning before he slammed into Saffron. She didn't budge an inch, not so he. The impact sent him stumbling back, only to be reeled in as she gripped him by the wrist. Blazing blue eyes met the gentle cerulean. This, she hissed at him, this was your plan? I knew you were up to something, but were you seriously just going to run out on us in the middle of the night? Her fingers tightened around his wrist, grinding the bones of his arms without even saying goodbye. John gulped a little. I'm sorry. You should be, mister. His muscles tensed in preparation for battle. It would be a losing one, he knew. He'd never been able to beat Saffron in a straight fight. She was the very definition of what he wanted to be. Strong, brave, and unafraid to pick a fight for what she believed in. If she was standing before him now, his chances of escape were next to nil. Dad could take her, but he certainly couldn't. This is my life, sis. His voice warbled a bit in fear, but he stood fast. I have to do this. Her head bobbed in mild agreement. I know. I mean it. I won't let you stop me. Go right ahead. Don't make me open one of the 8 gates. Wait, what? He balked and edged back as her words cut up to his brain. You're letting me go? Did I stutter? She jerked a golden brow and planted a knuckled fist against one hip. You're not the only one in the family who dreams of the future, John. John felt his face burn with shame. No, of course he wasn't. It only made sense that his sisters might be chafing under Dad's rules. They'd always seemed so content, happy to train their skills in secret and do as they pleased. And yet here his big sister was letting him go. Foolish little brother, she flicked his forehead. I love you, but this is really reckless, even for you. Quick as a flash, she shot forward and pulled him into her arms. Just be careful, she whispered. This world isn't nice. You're really letting me go? Yep, she pulled away. She pulled back with a grin. I'll be a bit of a hypocrite if I didn't let my baby brother forge his own destiny. So, where will you go? He had given the matter no small amount of thought, but in the end the choice was clear. Mr. was too far away to make any meaningful headway. Dad had painted a bad picture of Atlas, and Vacuo was, well, Vacuo. He would be a fool to go there. No, he'd made his decision long ago, even before he forged his transcripts. To Vale, he said at last. She quirked a brow. That close? If you're going to run away from home, at least make it count. Easy for you to say. You can take that in a fight. After all, you're invincible. Saffron cocked her head to the side, reminding him of a lounging dragon regarding a small creature atop its scales. I'm really not. His left eye twitched. She really was. I watched Dad kick you through a mountain on that last vacation. You walked it off. Nah, I'm just sturdy. Not my point. She planted both hands on her hips. Do you want my help or not? Better that than having to fight her. Yes, there's a good little brother. She beamed and reached for him. Now hold it tight. Wouldn't want to drop you. Come again. John balked as she swept him into her arms. Hold on to what? What are you doing? Giving you a head start, silly. I don't think that's a very good idea. His words trailed off into a startled shriek as his sister crouched down him and rocketed off into the straight sky at night. And Naruto found the note 2 days later, two lines awaiting him within. I'm sorry, it read out. I have to try. Stubborn boy. Juniper swore. Oh, I'll have his hide. Beacon was amazing. Putting a near bout of air sickness aside, no vomit boy here. John found himself perplexed by the sight before him. A yard that sprawled for miles and miles in every direction, resplendent with tall tower and splendid spires. It was everything he'd imagined and more. This was his future. Assuming Dad didn't chase him down and drag him back by his short hairs, that was still a very real possibility here. Seth had dropped him off in Ville, and all but sped back. He could only assume she'd have to stuff his ire as well. Really, he couldn't possibly thank her enough for her help. Maybe he'd get her a gift basket or something. Girl liked those things, right? All right, he went through the mental checklist. Don't show off too much. Try not to attract attention. You're a normal guy, normal niece. I can do this. He strode through the gangway, chin held high. People noticed and subconsciously made way for him. Maybe this wasn't so bad after all. Dad had been right. Just a little confidence, then people would part for you. Thump! A mighty explosion shook the earth and rattled his ears. John whirled, fearing the worst. I can't do this. His first fear was for his father. That Naruto had tracked him to Beacon, had come to hunt him down, but he found the space behind him quite bereft of any such bond. Instead, he espied a rather cross-looking girl in white berating another girl in red. By the sage, he could hear those two from here. Really, they reminded him of his sisters. Sable and Sabrina were always squabbling about something or another. His brow furrowed at the memory, if only because it reminded him of home. They shouldn't be fighting at all. He took a tentative step forward. Someone bumped into him and nearly knocked him sprawling. I'm sorry. A soft, strangled, familiar voice airs in his ears. Oh, you're right. His spine stiffened. This was it. His first real interaction with someone in Beacon. Play it cool. With exaggerated slowness, he pivoted in place, prepared what he hoped was the suitable, impressive retort on his tongue. Failure by thy name is John. Words abandoned him completely. Indeed, his mind faltered the moment he failed eyes on her, for this was most certainly a member of the fairer sex. Startled green orbs blinked back at him, framed by hair the color of blood, and a smile so fragile he thought it might shatter at any moment, made him want to give her a hug, you know. Bronze was her armor, and she wore it well. She was also wearing a mask, not an actual mask, but one of a different sort. Now, Naruto and Juniper hadn't raised the fool. John knew what girls were, but this was the first time he'd met someone so wow. She quirked a crimson brow at him. You do speak the common tongue, don't you? I speak, pretty girl, he babbled out. Another brow quirked the first, though foot to meet mouth. You're a strange one, she smiled a little. Who are you? This was his chance. Well, the name is John Arc, short, sweet, rolls out the tongue. Ladies love it. He all but thrust his hand at her in a frantic attempt to salvage the situation. Just a normal guy, added almost as an affirmation. Nice to meet you, miss. Nice to see you again, said John's feet unto his mouth. Jade orbs flicked down to his hand, back up to his face. Her lips parted, said something he didn't quite hear. After a moment, pause. The redhead seemed to recover her wits. Pyra, she reached out and clasped his hand at last, sounding strangely resigned. Pyra Nikos, she said as if he should recognize her. He didn't. Was that a bad thing? And so was a small town, and he didn't watch television all that much, not when there was training to do, chores to be done, and sisters to corral. He felt a little guilty, though. She was looking at him so expectantly he had to say something. That's a nice name. Her eyes narrowed, and for an awful moment John wondered if he had stepped in it again. Girls got scary when they were angry. You don't know who I am, should I? He shrugged hopelessly. You're just a normal student like me, right? Her eyes widened. In hindsight, he had no way of knowing what he'd done, nor the switch he'd just flipped. How could he? He was just a simple country boy, no delusions of grandeur, besides becoming a huntsman, but really that didn't count, and no wild aspirations to be had here. Nope, not a one. Yes, she said after a moment's pause. Normal, she repeated the word once. That's all I am, normal, just like you. Her hand released his almost reluctantly, as though she were afraid he might evaporate into mist if she let go. When he didn't, she dared a tentative smile. It was nice to meet you, John. I'll see you later. Wait, Paro jolted. Wanna be friends? He threw the words out almost desperately. It was a foolish thing to say, and he regretted it almost immediately, but he was just so lost here. That's unexpected. She blinked, somewhat startled by his bold request. We barely even know one another. That wasn't a no. I mean, John scratched the back of his head. Or my mom always says strangers are just friends you haven't met yet, and I don't really know anyone else here. Really? Pyro tilted her head, regarding him anew. When she smiled again, this time it felt genuine. I think I'd like that, John. Do you know your way to the auditorium? Not really. Here, she looped an arm in his. Allow me, I'll show you. Before he could even hope to protest, she strutted off, dragging him with her. He stumbled at first as her swaying hips brushed his, then matched her step. Had he just made a friend? He had. Nothing could keep him down now. He sauntered towards the stadium with a swagger in his step. John felt a dopey grin stretch across his face. I think I'm going to like Beacon. Yes, sir. Things were looking up for John Arc until quite suddenly up became down. Are you kidding me? The pad beneath his feet erupted violently, catapulting him into the air at top speed. What kind of initiation is this? Stupid headmaster, stupid initiation, stupid pad. A wild rush of wind wiped at his face like an angry Ursa, threatening to blind him completely as he spun hopelessly in the air. Teary eyes squinted against the gale to no avail. At first, he couldn't make a heads or tail of up or down, but that was a lot of green rushing up to him very fast. You can do this. Remember your training. Focus. Blue eyes lit with a faint spark of red. He reached back for his sheath and deployed it into a shield. Wind ripped at the sturdy metal barrier, bodily yanking it and him backward by proxy. His fingers shrieked in protest, but his grip held and he bled off precious momentum. What was once a terminal fall merely became an uncontrolled one. The tree rushing at his face, however, didn't seem to care. Even slowed as he was, John could see what would happen next. Aura was all well and good, but if he hit that all his sides, he'd be a greasy red smear. A sweep of his arms brought his free hand back, firm fingers clenched into a claw. Chakra swirled to life at his whim, forming a coruscating azure sphere within. Larger, he whirled at it, larger. His outstretched arm whirled into a tree like a falling meteor born through bark and sap alike. His eyes snapped shut against the branches as they scraped at his face, and rode the jutsu down, strutting in his aura reserves to win the day. And then quite suddenly he found himself alighted in a pointed crouch upon the forest floor. Perfect landing, he muttered to himself as he extinguished the jutsu. Now I just need to get a relic, find a partner, and get to the cliffs. Look out below! A crimson meteor crashed down beside him, causing the young John to jump. Somehow he knew who he would find even before he turned about. Call it fate, call it destiny, call it just blind, bloody luck. He had a feeling about this. He pivoted on one heel. As the dust cleared, sure enough, he recognized the young woman, even now rising on bent knees. Pyronikos beamed back at him. Hello, John. The champion smiled then, a real genuine smile that set his heart racing. Fancy meeting you here. A gloved fist planted itself on her lip on her hip. You wouldn't happen to have a partner now, would you? Her words drew a smile from him and a laugh besides. He was dense, not blind. Hey, Pyro, you have great timing. One object down, two to go. Maybe, just maybe, this would work out. There was no way, just no conceivable way this could blow up in his face. It bound to happen sooner or later. Naruto took one look at the soldiers currently standing on his doorstep and genuinely considered slamming the door in their faces. Might be worth it, then again, it might not, not with his family at his back. They'd come knocking this morning with sound and aplomb demanding to be seen. That alone was enough to put him off immediately. But the ultimatum they'd just given him, no, nope, not happening. Vine, was it? He dug a finger in his ears. You want me to come to Atlas? Nope. Respectfully, the spokesman continued, that wasn't meant to be a request. We've been watching you for some time now. Our country has need of you. Was that meant to intimidate him? Of course he'd been aware of them. He just didn't think they'd be so foolish as to actually try something. Not here, not now, not with his temper fraying as it was. It would be so easy to just reach out and give them a push, send them flying back the way they'd come. They were only a few specialists and a band of soldiers. No one had drawn their weapons yet. They wouldn't if they knew what was good for them. Naruto drew himself up in the doorway, hewed himself between them and the girls. The youngest shrank back behind Juniper's skirts. Jean mirrored them, blue eyes widened with fear. Daddy, what's wrong? Your family's with you? Vine leaned around him, his neutral expression never wavering for a moment. Good, they can come with us as well, Juniper absolutely hissed. We will go nowhere with you. Vine blinked. With all due respect, your compliance is not a factor here, ma'am. An awful pale fell over their group. Dumbass! Someone shouted from the back of the Elysian entourage. Don't say it like that! You'll piss him off! Too late. Naruto exhaled slowly. His breath emerged as a thin plume of steam in the morning mist. First John runs off. Now this. The specialist stepped back half a pace. I'm afraid I must insist. Men, detain them. They weren't prepared for the laughter. I can't believe this is happening again. Naruto tittered softly, bringing them up short. It's absurd. I just can't believe it. He pinched the bridge of his nose. Why do you keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result? Isn't that the definition of insanity? Are you mad? You must be. His eyes were red now. Juniper realized his body beginning to glow. You know, his voice deepened into a low snarl as black marks burnished across his now golden form. One day, the last one of you at least the idiots will ask me, Naruto, why did you wipe our continent off the map? His head rose, eyes slitted and intent like nothing Vine had ever seen. And you know what I'll say? Juniper yanked Azula back. Naruto bared his teeth in a snarl. It's because you're all so fucking rude! His fist slammed forward and the specialist crashed backwards, bleeding from a dozen wounds. Previews. Combat class. All right, he could do this. Shouldn't be hard. John Arc will face. Miss Schnee, you seem eager today. Why don't you try your luck? The girl absolutely glowered at him. Well, this bode poorly. Pyrrhus squeezed his shoulder. Fight well. It's not the fight I'm worried about. Your sword transforms. Shh, Ruby, no. The little weapon girl, addicted girl giggled. Ruby, yes, show me, show me, show me. Yang shrugged. You brought this on yourself. She's never gonna stop until you give up the goods. Ah, Yang, don't say it like that. You really are an uppity little thing, John blanched. Kerma, why are you in my head? Why do you think? Someone needs to keep an eye on you. Blake, you're drooling. Saffron gulped. So, Dad, there's someone I want you to meet. Naruto crooked a brow. Why are you up? What are you up to? That is a person? Terra waved immediately. Nice to meet you, sir. Huh. So this is my team. Naruto glared up at the battleship, raised a hand. Burn. End of chapter 4.